As a pilot, there's a fine line you don't want to cross in an emergency, where a forced landing becomes a crash. Luck favors the prepared, and I was lucky to land rather than crash the day my propeller decided it needed some alone time and left me and the rest of my Pitts S1 cruising eastbound at 7,500 feet over Los Angeles. I guess it didn't feel like leading the way to Arizona for another attempt at breaking my inverted flat spin world record. Here's the story of when my prop decided to abandon me and how I managed to navigate what was essentially a brick with a 3-to-1 glide ratio to a dead stick landing on an airport. Given the population density of LA, this could easily have been a crash into a house or a strip mall. I'm just going to highlight the main events of the situation and wrap this video up with key takeaways every pilot can learn from when facing an in-flight emergency. I'll also link below to the in-depth story on AOPA's website and some other videos and podcasts where I've talked about this in more detail. On April 27th, 2019, I had just taken off from Santa Paula Airport and was cruising over the San Fernando Valley heading east to Yuma, Arizona for another shot at breaking my own inverted flat spin Guinness World Record, which, by the way, currently stands at 98 turns from over 24,000 feet. I accomplished that in 2016. Back to the fateful day. This was supposed to be an uneventful cross-country flight to reposition my Pitts for another shot at aerobatic glory, and it would have been, till it wasn't. I'd reached 7,500 feet, cruising at 2,600 RPM, and adjusted the mixture. This Pitts S1, which I named Spinner 3, had some aggressive engine improvements to make it perform in the flight levels, specifically to break my spin record again. And it was a real powerhouse. It had a purpose-built Lycoming 360 engine with 12.5-to-1 pistons, cold air intake, 4-to-1 exhaust, a profiled cam, electro air electronic ignition system, and it cranked out 248 horsepower, and that's a lot for an 800-pound airplane. Most Cessnas running a Lycoming 360 only produce 180 horsepower. But this engine wasn't just about power. It was about calculated risk and reward. And of course, looking cool. It's red, and everyone knows that's the sexiest color for an engine, and the whole airplane too. About 10 minutes after takeoff, I started feeling a vibration. After years of flying, you get used to little quirks. At first I thought maybe it was just a trim issue, or some lazy footwork on the rudder. So I eased back on the power and that confirmed it. This was coming from the engine or the prop. And then there was a noise. Not a loud bang, just a little ting. That was the alert sound from the plane saying that all your training and preparation was about to be tested. Right after that, the engine started racing. I instinctively pulled back the throttle, and that's when it hit me. Well, technically, the propeller hit the plane which I happened to be flying in, but in any case, it was gone. I was now flying a Pitts with no prop over Los Angeles. Let that sink in. The difference between landing and crashing was up to me and what I do next. There was 6,500 feet between me and the ground with Whiteman Airport about 2 miles away. I knew that airport well. I'd trained and taught there for years. So I pushed the nose down to maintain airspeed, because when you've just lost 18 pounds off the front of a short airplane with a CG envelope an inch wide, that's not the time to see if best glide speed is still valid. I needed control authority, then I aimed for runway 12. After aviating and navigating, it was time to be communicating. So I just keyed the mic and talked to SoCal Approach. Take a listen.
Taking emergency landing, Whiteman Airport.
781, Roger, VFR descent approved, and do you require any further assistance? Whiteman is 11 o'clock, a mile and a half.
Sorry, can you clear a path? I think my prop departed.
781, Roger, and your VFR descent approved to the field. You have the field in sight, low, and it's about 2 west of you, or correction, 2 east of you, 781.
What's the wind direction?
781, Burbank wind is 0703.
The Whiteman weather. Copy. What's Whiteman wind?
Whiteman weather is showing 3 miles visibility, haze, sky clear, altimeter 2909 or 8. They're landing runway 12.
Pass for me.
781 and Burbank winds calm at the moment.
Can you see me? I'm near Whiteman. I'm going to make an emergency landing. 1-2.
Hit 781 affirmative, and you can proceed direct to the field. There's nobody in the vicinity at the moment. Do you have the field?
Right, I'm going to circle down.
Hit 781, you're clear to land, runway 12 or runway 30, winds calm at the field. You're clear to land, runway 12 or runway 30, wind calm at Whiteman.
3295. Have LS runway 8.
Southwest 3295 Burbank Tower, traffic helicopter operating runway 15 restricted north, wind calm, runway 8 clear to land.
Clear to land, runway 8, Southwest 3295.
Helicopter 3 Romeo Stereo, taxiway Delta clear for takeoff, make right traffic runway 15.
Romeo Whiskey, and if you can you reach out to aircraft 781, let him know he's clear to land Whiteman 1230.
We'll go out to aircraft 78, let him know he's cleared either runway at Whiteman, 2 Romeo Whiskey.
Affirmative, 781's a call sign.
Aircraft 781, this is 172 Romeo Whiskey. I'm relaying from air traffic control. You're cleared to either runway at Whiteman. Either runway at Whiteman is cleared for your landing, 781.
Being on frequency already with ATC gave me the time to focus on more pressing matters. Altitude and proximity to the airport were my only real advantages. Some pilots might have gone straight for the runway, but I knew better. I aimed for a point on final approach that would allow me to line up with the runway and manage energy to avoid coming up short and crashing into homes at the approach end, or coming in too hot for the 4,000-foot piece of asphalt I needed to stay on, because Osborne Street is at the far end of the runway and it's usually full of commercial truck traffic. Ground looping in the dirt next to the runway would have been a better option if I was slightly fast, but going through the fence after getting wheels on the ground and suddenly appearing in front of an 18-wheeler would have been bad, really bad. As you can see on the map with my GPS flight path overlaid, I arrived off the approach end of the runway with plenty of altitude, so I spiraled down until the setup looked right. Then I aimed for the runway and bled off altitude and speed with an S-turn, then a slip, keeping the descent rate in check, all while keeping control of the aircraft towards touchdown. That final approach, which literally could have been my final approach, worked out well. When I touched down a bit fast, it wasn't perfect. There were a few minor bounces, but I kept it straight and managed to roll it to a stop about 2,000 feet down the runway, almost to the midfield taxiway. So I climbed out to push the plane another 100 feet or so to get it off the runway, but I was down, safe, and alive. So that was a forced landing, but it could have been a crash. What saved me was preparation and use of the threat and error management model, which I talked about in great detail in another video, which I'll link to below. Flight planning to be near as many airports as possible, flying high to give myself time to deal with emergencies, and always talking to ATC for flight following are the things that saved my life. This emergency was a no-time threat. I had to deal with it as it unfolded and rely on my base skill set. Had I not done threat mitigation in the planning phase, it would have increased the risk of losing control of the situation, and that's the key lesson. I don't know where that propeller or its pieces ended up, as it was carbon fiber and likely shattered since it hit the plane on departure. And we still don't know precisely why an engine and propeller, with only 18 hours on the Hobbs meter, didn't like each other and wanted a divorce. But none of that really mattered in the moment. What saved me was preparation, my training and experience, flight planning, flying high, staying in contact with ATC, and always giving myself options, which is what threat mitigation is all about. When things go wrong, muscle memory, gut reaction, and training take over. People in emergencies default to their baseline. That day, I learned just how thin the line between crashing and landing can be. You can't always predict what's going to happen, but you can prepare. When the unexpected happens, the difference between life and death comes down to threat and error management in your flight preparation and planning, then staying in control. Train hard, fly safe.